Hello, my name is Tara Ade. I am the Senior Director of Programs here at Safe Haven, and for today's video, we are going to spend some time just talking a little bit about who Safe Haven is, the programs that we offer, and ways in which you can get involved if the mission and the work of Safe Haven resonates with you. Safe Haven is a domestic violence and human trafficking organization with a mission to prevent and end relationship abuse and exploitation. We have been in this community for over 30 years, and back in 2018, we had the opportunity to break ground and begin building this brand new building that we currently operate out of. So we opened in this particular building in 2019. It is our third building that we've utilized now for office or shelter space. When Safe Haven was formed in 1990, we operated out of a residential home that we had converted into a space to use as a shelter. Before moving into this building, we also operated out of a different residential home that we again had converted into a shelter as well as leased office space. And so it was a really big deal for us to be able to not only grow our infrastructure and our physical space, but build a building that intentionally, in every way possible, was designed with this purpose in mind. And so it's a trauma-informed, safe, and secure building for us to be able to serve victims and survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking, and increase our capacity to do trainings and education and convene community partners as we collaboratively work towards addressing domestic violence and human trafficking. This now is our only building that we have. It has brought everything under one roof, which is becoming more common for domestic violence agencies, but it was a huge shift for Safe Haven. A lot of times folks will ask, now that our shelter is public, the address is known to the community, what does that mean for the safety of both our staff and the individuals that we serve? And one of the things that we learned pretty quickly as we were starting to research what this building would look like is that creating being able to build a building where you can integrate in safety mechanisms such as the way in which different places of our building lock and our cameras and just the overall design of the building was a measure that made this space much safer than taking a residential home and trying to convert it into a shelter. And the other thing that we know too about domestic violence, and particularly perpetrators of this type of harm, is that they don't often want their behaviors, their actions to be caught. They, thrive in the secrecy that's often created around domestic violence. And so while it's not impossible that an abuser would show up to this space, we learned that it was far less likely for them to show up to a space that's visible, it has community visibility, than a home tucked away at the bottom of a driveway. So I think, we've been really fortunate that our community invested in this space and we were able to build this, and it has been instrumental in how we are able to offer even more comprehensive, more trauma-informed survivor center services at Safe Haven. A few other things about Safe Haven. We are a 24/7 agency, so 365 days a year, and through the evening hours, weekends, holidays, we are always staffed, and we are always available to our community members and those that may be experiencing a crisis. The best way, well, there's a couple ways in which folks get connected to our services. Most often, I would say, is probably our hotline. And so that is listed here on this slide. And individuals can call or text our hotline, which we have learned is something that's really helpful because not everybody is going to feel comfortable or it is safe for them to pick up the phone and call us. So that text feature has been really helpful. You can also go onto our website, shmgr.org, and chat with an advocate via a chat service that we have. And so that's really helpful for individuals that maybe only have a Wi-Fi phone or a tablet, or maybe they're using they can get access to a library computer or something like that. And so all three of those, call, text, and chat, are available 24/7. We also offer walk-in hours. And so what I mean by that is individuals can literally just show up to our building Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and request to speak with an advocate. I think that's been something that's really helpful for the work that we do, because individuals, particularly that are in crisis and navigating a lot of different things, it could be really hard for them to be able to know when exactly they could set up an appointment and follow through with that appointment. And so one of the shifts that we've made over the years is saying, you don't need an appointment time if you don't want one. Just show up and request to speak with an advocate, and we can make that happen pretty quickly. Now, if you would prefer to set up a time to meet with an advocate, an appointment, that's okay too. The last thing I want to just name too is that Safe Haven is a safe space for everyone. We recognize that domestic violence and human trafficking happens in all communities, all neighborhoods, across all different identities that folks in our community hold, but we also, we also recognize that particular communities that have experienced marginalization, that often exist in the margins of our society, experience additional barriers and challenges in reaching out. For example, folks in the LGBTQ community may not always receive affirming and validating services in their community, and that fear or barriers that they face often can lead folks in the LGBTQ community to stay in relationships longer and experience more escalated forms of abuse. And so it's really important to us that we are intentional in our partnerships and our outreach, so that we can do a really good job of serving all individuals that have experienced domestic violence. We are also a bilingual agency. Many of our staff are fluent in both English and Spanish. And that's not to say that those are the only two languages that are spoken here in West Michigan. We also have a commitment through our language access policy and protocols to serve any survivor in their preferred language. And so if a staff member does not speak the language that somebody wishes to engage in services with, we would utilize our translation or interpretation services with some established partners that we have in the community. We also, one last thing I want to mention too, is that individuals that are seeking services are able to do that completely free of cost. So all of our support services are free. We don't require an ID. We do not require for somebody to have insurance. We would never bill. We would never require any form of documentation or status in order to engage in services here at Safe Haven. I'm going to go ahead and play a short video that gives you a little bit more information about who Safe Haven is.
So when I first got connected with Safe Haven, every day was just about survival at the most basic level. There wasn't space for other things. There wasn't space for growth. It was like barely existing. I think we grow up assuming that what we see in front of us is what there is and that that's normal or healthy. But when you are made aware of what healthy actually looks like, that's a game changer. Safe Haven's impacted my life in a number of ways, but the biggest thing I could say is that they walked with me through the hardest of hard times and led me to this place where now I'm out and thriving and able to help others.
Statistically, we know when you're in any gathering of any size, you're with survivors. We are part of a greater movement of people that want to see the end to violence and abuse and exploitation. We aren't just a crisis response agency, but we are a facilitator and catalyst to hope and the next season for people. And so that means we have a commitment to move people into a season where they're thriving.
We all actually do believe that we can prevent and end domestic violence. You can see it in the volunteers at the front desk. You can see it in every individual, no matter where they are in the building.
People we bring together around supporting survivors and ending relationship abuse, it's a pretty wide range of folks. And that's something that not everybody can do well in this time.
We really walk alongside people, and so a lot of times what our advocates are doing is providing that consistent emotional support.
It's important that I show up so that they can know that the obstacle that they in right now, the little valley, there is people in the valley with them.
It's being able to bring the survivor voice to the forefront so that it's not just a group of people who people are helping and taking care of, but it's a group of people who have ownership and can tell you what they need.
For Michael and I as preventionists, we're concerned with the upstream. My work is focused on building an institute focused on prevention for folks in different organizations that could become leaders in their communities and help to join with us to really work to prevent and end domestic violence.
We're in the communities, working directly with people to not only challenge maybe what our society's perceptions are on abuse, but also to give them the tools to continue to pass down that knowledge.
One thing Safe Haven does well is recognizing needs and not being afraid to find the answers. That's one thing that we do very well, is showing up.
I just like showing up for people because my village, they show up for me.
In order to do this work, I think that it requires this radical optimism. You have to believe that our society is capable of this change. We have an obligation to our communities to work together to end violence.
This is a long movement. We are committed to the work we do because the mission is bigger than us. Whenever there is injustice, there's always people who are working together to right that, to bring a new future. And that gives me hope.
All right. So I'm going to just give a little bit more of an overview of some of the things that we're going to talk about in our time together. We'll talk a little bit more about Safe Haven's vision and values, and then I'll spend some time diving a little bit deeper into the programs that Safe Haven offers, both our prevention programming and the intervention or support services that we offer to folks in our community. And then I'll close it out with how folks can continue to be connected with the work that we are doing. So up on the top of this slide, you'll see our values as an organization: stewardship, partnership, that deep commitment that we cannot do this work alone, nor would we ever want to do this work alone. And so how do we develop authentic and intentional relationships with other community leaders and organizations to ensure that holistic care is offered to those in our programs, and that we are looking deeply at the root causes of domestic violence and human trafficking and exploitation, and addressing those throughout our community. I didn't mention with stewardship, that's that commitment that we have to steward our funds and our donations, both financial, monetary donations, in-kind donations, the giving of time and talent that we have through our volunteers, and folks that are really championing and advocating for our work in the community, that we steward those gifts well and responsibly. Equity and belonging. Victims and survivors of domestic violence deserve to have services offered to them in a way that represents their identities and their specific needs based on their lived experience. And so both for the individuals that we serve as well as our staff and our volunteers, we want to create a space where individuals can show up fully and authentically as themselves and be celebrated and not just be included in this work, but feel that they have value and a sense of belonging in working towards our mission. Survivor-centered is this commitment to develop everything that we do centered around the needs of those that have been impacted by domestic violence and human trafficking. So it's not, create something and then figure out how you integrate that into the need of the community, but instead listening and developing and creating, often co-creating things and services with the needs of survivors at the forefront. We have a deep commitment to excellence, doing this work well, knowing what our expertise is, and where we don't have expertise, leaning on and including and valuing the expertise of others in our community. Safety is important, from as I had mentioned earlier, the design and infrastructure of this building to the way in which we offer services. Individuals deserve, as a basic human right, to live healthy and safe lives, and we are committed in every way possible to working towards that in our community. Systems change. Domestic violence and human trafficking is a devastating, there's almost not words to describe the deep impact that it has here in our community and across our state. And to prevent violence, to reduce the impact of the harm that's happening in our community, we know that we have to go upstream. We know that we have to work to change the environments and the policies and the attitudes and the beliefs that exist in our community that allow violence to thrive. And so that commitment to change systems, to create safer communities is evident in so much of the work that we do here at Safe Haven. Faith, we are a faith-based organization, and recognize, even in the infancy of who Safe Haven was, this particular need in faith communities to be able to recognize the worldview that individuals bring, often, not always, but often to who they are, and also recognizing that for many survivors of domestic violence, additional harm has been done through kind of the cloak of faith or religion. And that looks a lot of different ways, either by an abuser using faith, or more particularly scripture or faith teachings, to condone or justify abuse, or using, for example, the church or leadership in the church to further perpetuate the abuse and harm. So many individuals come to Safe Haven wrestling with, what they've experienced, both the abuse at the hands of the abuser, but also, that intersection of faith and domestic violence. And so being equipped to sit in that space and support individuals through that lens is really important to Safe Haven, while also recognizing that that isn't going to be a need of every survivor that we serve. And that is okay with us. We would never force faith or integration of faith in somebody's service plan or support that they receive at Safe Haven, unless that's something they're initiating and asking for. And then the last is social norms change. And so that's the work that we are doing to change attitudes and beliefs and kind of those unspoken rules, harmful rules or norms that further create an environment for abuse to thrive. And so working to change that through many of our prevention programming is something that's really important to Safe Haven. And you can see the vision on the bottom of the slide as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the prevention and education work that we do here at Safe Haven. On the left part of the slide, you'll see the different types of sectors and types of prevention programming that we do. I'll go through them just really quickly. So youth violence prevention, or sometimes you'll hear us even call it YVP, is the work that we do primarily in schools, but also with youth-serving organizations. So it's often curriculum that we're doing with youth, primarily high school, some middle school audiences. So equipping youth with the knowledge and the skills to prevent violence from happening in the first place. The next area that we focus a lot of our prevention programming on is workplaces. You know, in particular, working with HR, human resource staff, managers, working to help equip employers to support individuals in their workforce that may be experiencing domestic violence, as well as putting in place protocols and policy to ensure that violence is not taking place in their facilities or with the use of their, like, for example, you know, staff using work time or work property to perpetrate violence. So that's some of the work that we do with workplaces. We often do work within faith communities, helping them to understand domestic violence and exploitation, helping them to put policies in place to ensure that survivors are believed and supported and receive the care that they need, and then also familiarizing faith communities with the work of Safe Haven so that if they are supporting a survivor or they have an abuser in their, for example, congregation, that they know how to engage in the services that we have at Safe Haven. They can provide those warm referrals. They can get support from Safe Haven in navigating those often complex and at times dangerous situations. We also do a lot of work with human service agencies, a lot of nonprofits, you know, across all different types of sectors, whether it's youth serving or child welfare, immigration and refugee services. But across many of these nonprofits, case managers, clinicians are often, you know, focused around that respective agency's mission. But that doesn't mean that many of the clients that they aren't serving have also been impacted by domestic violence. And so, again, helping folks in those roles understand abuse, understand, for example, how to screen for abuse, how to provide support, how to engage in warm referrals. And for some of the organizations that we work with, it's also helping them to think, you know, what are the environments and practices they can put in place to potentially prevent violence from happening. Healthcare is very similar to the work that we do with human service agencies, you know, primary care providers, emergency departments, helping, again, to screen for domestic violence and human trafficking, what are best practices in doing that, and then if you are getting disclosures around violence, how are you responding, supporting, referring. And then the last area that we focus on in our prevention programming is in higher ed. So we work with a number of universities and colleges in some of the prevention and intervention programming that they're doing, helping to equip leaders in those spaces to provide safe and supportive environments for students that have experienced abuse and engage in prevention programming across campus to hopefully empower those in those communities to be committed to working towards violence prevention. On the right-hand side, this icon graphic that you're seeing kind of just gives a much higher level overview of the types of work that we often are doing with these sectors, whether it's a needs assessment, you know, a lot of listening and surveying and understanding what do they need. And then often we're transitioning to then providing training and education, helping to establish policies. I gave the example, for example, helping somebody develop a screening tool for domestic violence. That is all the type of work that we do within our prevention programming. I already talked a little bit about social norms change. Just making note that oftentimes, particularly when we look at like the curriculums that we're facilitating with youth, whether it's our school-based curriculum or we have another program called GERRY, which stands for Grow, Engage, Read, Imagine, where we use literature. We have a curated book list, and then accompanying with that is reading guides and activities that parents and youth can do with each of those books that reinforce the topics or themes in the books. And so many of those books focus on things like nonviolent conflict resolution, consent, boundary setting, strong female leadership, addressing harmful attitudes around hypermasculinity. And so, again, using books to facilitate conversations and change around how we view things that may be harmful and create an environment where violence can thrive. All right, let's shift gears and talk for a moment about the intervention services that we offer at Safe Haven. Another word for intervention could be the support services or the things that we are directly doing to provide care and support for those that have been impacted by domestic violence and human trafficking. So, as I've said a couple of times, Safe Haven really focuses on domestic violence and human trafficking. Human trafficking is an umbrella term for both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. You also may have heard or may hear in the community the term exploitation. That often can be used in place of human trafficking. But those are the areas that we focus on here at Safe Haven. We serve adult survivors as well as youth adolescent survivors. If an individual is 14 or older, they can seek support at Safe Haven independent of a parent or guardian. So, for example, if a youth is dating and they're experiencing violence in their own dating relationship, they could come to Safe Haven to receive support around that. And then, you know, there are so many children that are often witnessing abuse in the home, have been impacted by abuse. So, for example, in our shelter, usually on any given day, more than half of those individuals in shelter are children that come in with the non-offending parent. And so we also offer some services throughout our programming to be able to help children develop healthy coping mechanisms, allow them in some of our programming to process through what they've witnessed and what they've experienced, and creating an environment for them to begin healing as well. So diving a little bit deeper, we have kind of three focus areas at Safe Haven when it comes to our intervention services. Our first is our emergency safe shelter. And so at Safe Haven, that is a 14-room, 56-bed shelter that services, anywhere between 200-300, sometimes even a little bit more individuals a year. Eligibility for that program I'll talk about in a little bit. We also have a Safe Transitions program, which is transitional housing, and soon will also become rapid rehousing as well. Currently, we have 5 units where individuals, 7 units, I misspoke, where individuals are able to stay for up to 2 years. Some of our transitional housing programming focuses on adolescents ages 18 to 24, and some of our other transitional housing doesn't have an age requirement, but the size of the units has really allowed us to serve larger families. So individuals with 3, 4, 5, 6 and above kids, which is one of the reasons why we've focused on that is because the barriers that we often see larger families face in securing safe and affordable housing. And then our last focus that we have in our program is our non-residential services. And so not every single individual that we serve, in fact, the vast majority of individuals that we serve will never utilize our shelter housing program. And so everything on the other side of this slide are all the services that are available to anybody. Non-residential program participants often are engaging in an array of these types of services. So case management, and case management, for example, is something that's available to non-residential clients as well as our shelter and safe transitions clients as well. Advocacy, so often we're advocating on behalf of the client within different systems or barriers or challenges that they're facing. For example, maybe somebody comes to us with a Section 8 voucher and their current housing situation is no longer safe. Maybe the abuser knows where they are living, they're showing up, they're threatening, harming them. Under Section 8, an individual has the legal right to be able to change their unit if they are experiencing domestic violence. And so some of the advocacy that our clients may do is helping the client navigate that change and the systems they have to work within to hopefully be able to change their housing location so that they can maintain safety. Crisis support is often offered through our hotline, text and chat services. And so, that's often people that are, kind of in an elevated state of crisis. Maybe they've just experienced an assault, or maybe they're out of the relationship, but something happened in their life in that season that is really causing them to experience a lot of fear or crisis. And so that kind of immediate, that's what I think of when I think of our crisis support. It's that immediate support that we're doing for individuals when they're reaching out to us. That often also includes a safety plan, which is a form of risk reduction. So, trying to equip them with some of the, helping them think through, like, what are the things that they can do to help keep themselves as safe as possible. We also offer mobile advocacy, and so that allows us to meet individuals in the community. The space that we have is beautiful, and we intentionally built in this particular area of our community, but it does not mean that everybody's going to be able to come to our building to receive support. And so the only thing that we currently aren't doing in our mobile advocacy is meeting with individuals in their homes. But public locations, for example, we have office hours at the Grand Rapids Public Library. We have office hours at the Hispanic Center of West Michigan, Pride Center, and also other public areas. Like if maybe a client is meeting at another organization, but they also need support from us, they can reach out to us and schedule a time for us to meet them in the community. So that is our mobile advocacy. We offer an array of support groups at Safe Haven, various days. They're both at Safe Haven, then we also offer some support groups in the community as well. And different types of support group, from basic education all the way to a peer support group. Personal protection order assistance, so helping individuals complete a personal protection order, helping them understand different steps in that process, whether it's having the PPO filed or served, whatever they're navigating, our advocates are well equipped to help them through that process. Again, lots of community-based services at Safe Haven, trying to do our best to have relationships and exist across communities here in Kent County, meeting folks where they're at so that they have access to our services. Integrated into much of the work that we do, particularly through support group and case management, is psychoeducation. So domestic violence and human trafficking is never the victim's fault. And in our work, we want to make sure that survivors know that. And then we also want to equip them with education so that they can understand what they've experienced and feel empowered to increase their protective factors against experiencing abuse in the future. And then, as I've mentioned, we are a bilingual agency. Many of our staff are bilingual, and that deep commitment to ensuring that whatever language somebody would like their services offered in, that we can meet that request. I'll speak just for a moment too about eligibility around shelter. I think this is one of the questions that we get quite frequently, to the nature of, are you always full? What happens if you're full? Who qualifies for your shelter? So I'll speak a little bit about that. Even though we have, I believe, one of the largest domestic violence shelters here in kind of throughout West Michigan, unfortunately, the need is so great that we often are full. But it is really hard for us to answer the question like on the spot of like, do you have space? Do you not? Because to be honest, things change so quickly. We could have a space available at 10 a.m. and by noon it would look very different. So regardless of whether or not we literally are full or not in our shelter, we always want to encourage individuals to reach out to us. Because shelter is not the only way in which we provide safety for individuals that are experiencing that risk. We can partner and make referrals to other domestic violence shelters out of county. We also have the YWCA in Kent County. And then we also utilize things like hotels to provide temporary safety before, for example, maybe a space opens up at Safe Haven. Our shelter is based on safety. It is not a homeless shelter. It is a domestic violence emergency safe shelter. And so safety isn't just determined by the presence of physical violence. Sometimes that's a misconception, like, oh, because you're looking at safety, if somebody isn't experiencing physical abuse, then they probably won't qualify. And so I that's not true. I like to, remind folks that there is a multitude of things that can help us understand the risk or the degree of lethality that they are experiencing in their relationship. So any individual that is looking for shelter, we do an assessment where we're really assessing things like, are they safe? What are some of the, abusers' behaviors? What has it maybe looked like when they've tried to leave before? What, has the abuser threatened to harm them? To what degree? Does the victim believe that abuser is capable of the threats that they've made? So there's a whole assortment of things that we are trying to understand while also being trauma-informed and survivor-centered. And so the most important thing that I can recommend in this is, really encouraging individuals to reach out to us directly. And allow us to engage with them and uncover a little bit more about what they're going through so we can make a good determination about shelter. And then, of course, if somebody didn't qualify for shelter, that does not mean that they cannot engage in other services at Safe Haven. And so we're often navigating what those services look like with individuals that reach out for support. Safe transitions, I talked a little bit about. These are some photos from one of our units. Again, this is a new program for Safe Haven. We launched it about 6 months ago. And so it's just been this tremendous gift from our community and an opportunity for us to really, again, Safe Transitions formed because of what survivors were telling us. Time and time again, they reported that one of their unmet needs was around housing. And housing is often that missing piece for them being able to achieve and maintain safety. And so out of that feedback and out of us understanding the landscape here in Kent County, the significant number of individuals that are experiencing housing insecurity, knowing that over half of individuals that are experiencing an episode of homelessness report that domestic violence is one of the leading causes the things that they experienced that led them to experience that housing insecurity or to be unhoused. And so it just really made sense for us to start leaning into this space to ensure that we can offer even more comprehensive services to those impacted by violence. This here, I think, in a lot of ways summarizes what I've talked about throughout our throughout this video. And so again, this is just that reminder that there are many, many different ways individuals can get connected to our services. No one is better than the other. It's kind of just what works best for the survivor. And then I also want to note too that, you know, our crisis services, our hotline, you know, text chat, all that is not something that is limited to just individuals experiencing abuse. I can think of times, you know, throughout my time at Safe Haven where maybe domestic violence or human trafficking was in the media a lot. Or maybe there was a national case that really brought our community's attention to this issue. And some survivors that maybe had been out of an abusive relationship for a long time kind of had feelings of fear or overwhelm kind of come back because there's more visibility around this topic. And so they just really needed somebody to be able to talk with and talk to and process through these feelings that were coming up for them. So they absolutely can utilize our services and reach out. And then the other example I like to use too is that maybe you're supporting somebody in your life, a friend or a family member that's experiencing domestic violence, and you're unsure what to do, or you know somebody in your life that's being trafficked, and you want to support them, but you don't really know what to do or what are best steps. And so you can reach out directly to Safe Haven to talk with an advocate, to talk with a staff member, and kind of use us as a sounding board. We can provide advice usually and help you navigate that situation as well. So a few other things, if listening to this video has sparked your interest in who Safe Haven is and what we do, there are a lot of ways that you can continue to be engaged and learn even more about Safe Haven. We always welcome community members to join us for a tour. We have a lot of different trainings that we do, as I've mentioned. One of those is our domestic violence seminar. We generally offer those at least 6 to 8 times a year. It's a 3-hour training that we facilitate here at Safe Haven that really gives that foundational and a bit of a deep dive around, what is domestic violence? How do you provide support to individuals that are experiencing abuse? And so those trainings are listed all on our website. If you go to the Learn With Us section on our website, you'll be able to register for those. Maybe hearing this video has sparked an idea for you around bringing Safe Haven into your organization or your workplace to do a training specific to the industry that you work in. Reach out to us. There is, again, a contact form on our website where you can request a training, and we'd love to explore that with you. And reach out if you have questions or ideas. Please don't hesitate to shoot us an email, to hop on our website and fill out that contact form so that we can continue to build commitment throughout our community and partners and advocates to work towards our mission of creating healthier and safer communities. The last thing that I'll plug here too is Safe Haven is able to offer the quality of care that we do in large part because of those that support us here locally in West Michigan. And so one way that we are able in particular to provide really good care in our shelter is through our wish list. And so you could pull out your phone, use that camera setting to click on that QR code that's on the screen right now. That'll take you to our wish list that has an array of things that we update it regularly, but an array of things that we currently could use to help provide good care in our shelter. And so that's just one more way that you can support Safe Haven. And then maybe you're watching this video because you're on the cusp of volunteering at Safe Haven. But if you are looking for a meaningful way to volunteer in your community, Safe Haven has a lot of different volunteer opportunities, some that work and interact with clients and some that do not. And so I would imagine that there's probably something that a volunteer opportunity that may be a good fit for you. And so really encouraging you to consider that, as it's such a vital part of us being able to do the work that we do here at Safe Haven. So that concludes all that I have. I appreciate you watching this video and learning more about Safe Haven. And again, if you have other questions or things that you want to share with us, please reach out. And thank you.